Good morning. I'm Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily. Now, today's question is, how do you change someone's mind? Not just about what to watch or where to eat, but about something big like politics or values. Well, if you're close to anyone who votes differently than you do, you know this can be a frustrating and painful question. Today's guest, political theorist Sarah Stein Lubrano, says the usual tactics, debates, fact checks, even heartfelt stories, don't actually work. In her new book, Don't Talk About Politics, Sarah explores a radical idea that people don't think their way into new beliefs, they live their way into them. If you want to shift hearts and minds, you've got to start with experiences, relationships, and community. Here's Sarah to share her key insights.
Hello, I'm Sarah Stein Lubrano, and I'm a writer, political theorist, and activist. My book is called Don't Talk About Politics, Changing 21st Century Minds. And I'm going to tell you 5 key insights from this book today. Don't debate it. Just presenting people with ideas or arguments doesn't change people's minds about political issues. I know this might sound strange or feel counterintuitive, and that's because we live in a society that's obsessed with the idea that if we just expose the truth in the media, debate what's best on air, write essays about an issue in school, or post about it on social media, people will eventually come to see the truth through this process of reasoning. And then, supposedly, they'll fight back against abuses of power or gravitate towards the right way of thinking over time. And this is a beautiful idea, but all the best evidence shows that arguments do not change minds. People who watch TV debates, for example, don't vote any differently after they watch them. And this is true across decades and across continents. Similar data shows that people do change their minds about, for example, scientific issues that appear to be apolitical. But once an issue seems political, people presented with new information don't shift their views. Even protest demonstrations have no effect on public opinion or government policy in the long run. All of this is probably because political issues are deeply attached to our sense of self, agency, and morality. Most of us don't feel that bad or stupid for having gotten some facts wrong, but we feel deeply threatened and disoriented to think we might have gotten a political issue wrong. We often experience the discomfort of something called cognitive dissonance. This is a discomfort that we feel, even unconsciously, when we encounter a contradiction between 2 or more of our own beliefs or actions. To resolve this often unconscious discomfort when we encounter these contradictions, we often hold tighter to our existing beliefs. We double down and we rationalize away evidence we don't like so we can feel comfortable again as soon as possible. You can actually see empirical evidence of this in the case of Trump voters. Most of them believed a felon shouldn't be allowed to be president, and they would say this in surveys right up until the time that Trump was convicted. Then a huge percentage changed their belief about felons 180 degrees, and suddenly they said it was fine for a felon to be president, and they also changed their mind about whether the things he had done were moral or acceptable. We all do this from time to time. We often shift our beliefs without really noticing it, just to hold on to the sense that we are broadly right in most of our fundamental beliefs. To do politics better, then, we have to get past the impulse to argue with people directly, because they will tend to respond like this. It's hard to let go of this impulse to debate things, to just pile arguments and facts onto people, but this is the first big step we have to take if we want to do politics better. Our actions change our minds, and not the other way around. It's tempting to think that politics works kind of like this. First, we think in the abstract about what the right idea is, and then we implement that idea in the world. But interestingly, psychology shows that our brains often work exactly the other way around. First, we make some changes in our lives, and then our political beliefs change as a result. People tend to shift their political beliefs towards the reality of their lives, especially toward their own personal actions. If they've experienced the effects of climate change, on average, they're more likely to believe in it. If they can no longer purchase plastic water bottles in their town, they conclude plastic is bad and they don't want it to be on sale. It's even unsurprisingly true that women who get turned away for an abortion they want become slightly less in favor of abortion. In most cases, it seems that we tend to shift our beliefs towards whatever our actual lived experience was, possibly, again, to resolve painful cognitive dissonance. And we do this even if we didn't choose the outcome that we experienced ourselves. This all can, of course, make people believe either good or bad things. But for those of us interested in changing people's minds or implementing social change, it means that if we want people to be interested in new ideas, we have to give them gateway actions to try things out, to expand their lived experience. If we want people to become more environmental, for example, we might ask them to help clean up a park. If we want people to become more open to migrants and migration, we might ask them to collect clothes for some migrants and refugees first. This is more effective than presenting people with arguments or even stories. Research shows that these small actions get people more and more interested in the issue, and that their beliefs come over time to align with these gateway actions. Researchers used to worry that if you did a small action towards a particular political issue, you'd feel off the hook for the rest of it. Like if you recycled, then you wouldn't go to the climate protest. But it turns out that it usually works roughly the other way around. We do small actions, and that gets us interested in big actions, and over time, we change our beliefs. Weak ties and regular protests aren't enough to sustain social movements. Many social movements of the last few decades have been remarkably ineffective. Demonstration-led protests, for example, appear to have had no effect at all on public opinion. Even the Black Lives Matter protests now appear to have had no overall effect on opinions about police violence in the United States, especially once the backlash is taken into account. Moreover, these movements often dissipate quite rapidly compared to older historical movements like the Civil Rights Movement, which lasted for decades. For those of us who want to change the world, this might be difficult news to take in. I find it tricky myself. I tend to support social movements that are on broadly the left. But it's an important thing for us to consider because it suggests that we need a change of strategy. Right now, most modern social movements are, in many ways, instances of networked protest demonstration, which means huge numbers of people gather together because of things they saw online, and then they go and they march or they demonstrate, but they don't necessarily engage in other forms of activism. And what sociologists have learned about these movements is that a lot of the time people are mobilized through their weak ties. So not their best friends or their close family members, but friends of friends, people who they saw a repost of, their boss's wife, and so on. And that's great in that it can mobilize a huge number of people at once, many more people than we used to be able to easily mobilize. But unfortunately, these weak ties tend not to last. The fact that we can find out about protests and get involved easily means huge numbers of people can be mobilized rapidly, but they can also disappear rapidly. For example, the Black Lives Matter protest had probably the largest number of participants in a protest movement in American history, but it also fell apart over time. The ties that network protests tend to create for people are fairly weak. Think about it. Would you show up for a close friend? Probably. You might even do it week after week, but you probably wouldn't do it for a less important friend year after year in the way you would if you got deeply embedded in a movement and all of your close friends were in it. In short, the ease of organizing with technology has probably backfired, leading to lower investment in activist causes over time. And in my book, I go through lots of evidence that it's really our friends that shape our political views in lots of different ways. They help us overcome prejudice, they help us elaborate our thoughts, they don't brainwash us and we don't always agree with them, but they're often the people that open a window into a new world for us so we can get invested. And so what we need to do in social movements is bring in people who really are our friends and build strong bonds of friendship within the movement as well. If you look at the civil rights movement, which was, of course, very successful in the long run, even though it suffered from low polling in the short run, a lot of what was successful about it was that people restructured their whole lives. They began to shop only at certain businesses. They began to hang out with people that were in the movement. They had lots of social spaces together. They did lots of long planning meetings together. It was difficult to join the movement in a way. There was a cost, but it also meant people were deeply psychologically invested. So the takeaway in many cases is that if you're organizing a movement, don't just tweet about it. Don't be too pleased if you get a lot of people to show up to the first meeting. The question is about how much you ask of people in the long run and how strong their social ties are. And when people come to the meeting, get them to sign up to bring their close friends and bring their social world into your movement. We all need to fight social atrophy. It might sound scary, but many of us have had our brains shrink over time. Research shows that when people are socially isolated, they lose the gray matter in the front of the brain associated with social skills and understanding social cues. These neurons get repurposed towards other uses because we're not using them for social interaction. As a result, social interactions feel like more work and they become more stressful. Have you ever felt like it's just too exhausting to hang out with people or that you want to start canceling plans? It feels like this a lot when someone is experiencing social atrophy. And when people become socially isolated, they also tend to become more suspicious of people and interpret social cues in a negative way. So they might think that the person who hasn't texted them back must hate them instead of, being a bit busy. If you've been there, I've been there too. This feeling is bad enough, but it turns out that our entire society is going through a period of intense social withdrawal. People have fewer friends than before, and they see other people face to face less frequently. As a result, perhaps not surprisingly, social trust, which is the amount of trust we tend to have in other strangers in our society to basically do the right thing, is also at an all-time low. Many of the factors for this lack of social trust are economic. With rises in the cost of living, people have had to move further and further apart, and it is harder and harder to find cheap and easy ways to go hang out in public spaces where we could meet new people or even see our existing friends. As a result, we end up turning to our increasingly addictive screens instead. On an individual level, it's good to think about social life as something like exercise that we need to gently push ourselves to do nearly every day, even if we have a moment of not feeling like it very much. Socializing helps preserve the health of our brain and the strength of our interpersonal relationships, and it turns out it's actually the single biggest predictor of happiness and well-being. But more than that, on a societal level, health depends on our social connections. When social trust declines, when people have fewer close relationships, they become less tolerant of other groups and more prejudiced against minorities. And as we all become more isolated and individualist, we come to know less about other people's lives and understand political issues less well. So to be well, both as individuals and as communities, as countries, we need to rebuild the social fabric. Commentators often despair about why people polarize on social media, why they're fighting on Twitter. But this kind of misses the point. There's a more fundamental problem that precedes us ever going online. We can fight back against this trust by starting offline and rebuilding our friendships and our physical social spaces. To change someone's mind, change their life. Throughout this book, I've explored how two things change our political views when words don't. Firstly, our long-term relationships, and secondly, our own actions and experiences. One of the best ways to build on this, if you're interested in creating social change, is to build structures, infrastructures in a way, that engage people in political life indirectly by restructuring their relationships and their possibilities for action. A key example in the book is that of a local food co-op. People who live within 1 or 2 blocks of each other buy bulk food together. Not only do these co-ops help people eat for as little as £5 or so a week, but it also means that people begin to be more aware of each other. They know who's in each other's households, what each other can afford. They begin to be more politically and socially minded. They learn about changes in the cost of living together. They consider how much food supermarkets waste, and they learn about how much profits these companies are making. And so they begin to think about the problem of food and the problem of the cost of living in an organized way. And then, as one organizer put it to me, by the time the eviction notices come in, people are organized, and they show up and block, for example, people who have come to evict each other. This interdependent, action-oriented kind of living together is, in fact, the basic unit of political life, more than something like debate could possibly be. What matters and what works when it comes to political engagement is this day-to-day building of relationships, this interdependence, and this trying out new ways of living. And I would like to argue that it's far more important than media campaigns or raising awareness or critical thinking or messaging or framing or any of that divorced from action, especially arguing with one another online and in person. That's what politics really is, living our lives together and choosing action and thinking together as we do it.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, everyone, you can get a copy of Don't Talk About Politics at your favorite bookstore or by using the link in the episode notes. And go to nextbigideaclub.com to find out about our hardback subscription club, where we send you the best new nonfiction books as selected by our curators, Adam Grant, Susan Cain, Malcolm Gladwell, and Daniel Pink. You can check it out at nextbigideaclub.com, and if you use the code DAILY at checkout, you'll get 20% off. I'm Michael Kovnat. See you tomorrow.